Introduce. So welcome everyone. My name is Anita Thompson. I teach art workshops for libraries and other venues, and I am thrilled to be here this evening teaching for Abington Library. As Mimi said, please check out the website for lots of other fun things to do. Abington has a ton of programs, and they've been so busy this summer. I was teaching there last week, and I'll be there in person this week doing a kids program. And there's just so many fun things to do. So please check their website. And also make sure that the library is open, in case something like today happens, where the library has to close a little early. Welcome. So, as everyone sees, the information is in the chat. You want to make sure to definitely be able to have something to put your paints on, because we do some mixing with this. This is our Summer in Greece painting. Hi, Julie. This is being recorded. I will send this the recording out to Mimi. When she has a chance, she will send it to all of you and those that registered. And you'll be able to either, share it or redo it, whichever you like. So also make sure that you are on speaker view. I have spotlighted the video so that you are able to see this large. And we're going to get started. So it's a rather simple drawing. Everything we do is with paint mostly, but we are going to use a little bit of some perspective with this painting. I was saying at the beginning of this program, or before we started, I've never been to Greece. I do hear that Barb on here is going to Greece in October. I know that because Debbie told me, and you were interested in doing this. So that is so fun. I hope to reconnect with you after. My husband and I are going to Italy in October, and Barb, it sounds like she's going to Greece, so we'll have to compare notes. All right, so we are going to start off with our building on the left, the small sort of building that is covered in some vines. I'm going to just put my camera a little bit closer because I can, because this is such a small painting. Look for more of these small paintings in the fall. I'm going to be releasing those by the end of this week to the librarians, and a little more right after the weekend. But very excited to be doing some of these smaller paintings again, because we get to do a lot of this detail like we do in this one. So over here on the left, we're going to start at the top of our, the top left corner, and just have our pencil go down not quite halfway. So halfway would be here. We don't want to go there. We're going to go up a bit because we're going to be making the first part of this small building here. We have a curve that's happening, and then it goes up a little bit higher. And then we go straight down. And we're going to go down a little closer towards the bottom of our canvas here. Not the exact bottom, but what I mean is, going in that direction. Okay, so we have a simple building like this. We're not going to be drawing the greenery on any of this. We will be painting that in later on. So after that, we're going to create our horizon line with the water. It's going to be about right here. Obviously, we only go a little bit over because we have to make room for our building. And then we're also going to create the other line for our sand. So here's for our water. This is for our sand. And that is going to bring us to the first part of our building. So our building goes starting here, and you can see where I lined my pencil up. It's not a straight line. And then we're going to go inward just a little bit. And from there, we're going to leave this part alone. And we're going to come back over here because what we're going to do is we're going to start the inclines to this building. So it's very small. And just take your time. So basically, we have steps happening with this building that you can't see. Okay, so that's the one side of our building. And you may have to move your water over a little further to that part of the building. This is bringing us over to the other part, the longer part of the building here. And so that longer part is taller. So we extend the line like so. And from that, we create a bit of a roof. I'm going to make that a little bit thicker. Now take your time on this. I'm just laying it out, and I'm going to give you more time in order to create this. I know that it can be tricky, the angles. So please take your time. We have a little bit of a top part of that building there. And we're going to be drawing in some windows too. We have 2 windows on this first building here. And then a window and a door. On this one. So with the door, what we have happening is the door goes in a bit. So you can see that I have made this small line here. And because of the angle, your door is going to seem sort of lopsided. It's a little bit longer. Your line should be longer on this side. And I'm going to show this up close just so you can see where the drawn angles are. We're also going to draw in the shadow shape right over here for this building. And so that shadow shape is going to look a little something like this. So again, it's just as it says, it's the shape of the shadow that's happening. We do have a shadow shape here as well. So we're going to very lightly draw that in as well. It's about right there, give or take. And we're going to get started. So we're going to be using a combination of our flat brush. This one isn't as flat as I usually use. It's really a filbert, but you want a flat brush and a smaller round brush. This is for the details. This painting only calls for 2 of these brushes, but if you have a very tiny round brush, you might want to use that for when we get to the windows and all of this other, small details. Some people like to use a very small round brush if you have it, but it's not necessary. I'll be showing you how to make sure the point on your round brush will stay pointed. So we're going to dip our flat brush into our water just to get it a little bit wet. And then I like to tap it a little bit on the paper towel before we get started. We're going to also start with the sky in the background. So the way this is going to work is we're going to start off with the sky and the water. And then we're going to continue into the buildings and the sand. So there's a lot of fun mixing of colors in this painting. So with our sky, so here are our colors. We have the blue, black, white, green, and this is a golden brown. We're going to be mixing each of these colors with white and also black. So the first thing we're going to start off with is our blue. And what we're going to do in order to achieve the sky is we're going to start off with our blue, but we're going to mix just a little bit of white in with it. So we want to get more of a color like this. So just a shade, maybe a shade or so lighter. And we're going to be using, as I mentioned, our flat brush. And we're just going to start to lay in the first layer, which is our blue. So you may want to switch to your round brush when we get to where the buildings are. It might be easier for you to sort of go around them. So I'm now also switching to my round brush. And what I mean with that is you can just kind of outline right along the edge of the buildings and the water. And just take your time. Just gently paint around those areas. And then you can fill the rest of the sky in with this blue, but we're obviously going to be painting in lighter hues of the blue that we're using into this so that we get a nice, we're going to get a bit of a cloudy sky. bit of a textured sky with some varying colors of our blue mixed in with white. And we're even going to add in a little bit of green. But our first layer is this blue. And it's just should be a light layer, just so we get that base color on. Like so. And when you are ready, you're going to keep that blue on your brush, and you're going to pull a bit from your white and make a lighter blue, as you see here. And we're going to start mixing that in with the sky. So what I'm doing is first I'm going back and forth to make it look a little bit, a little misty. And we're going to leave that dark blue right around this area here. So we're going to load up our brush again. Some more white. Now this is just the sky so far. We're going to be adding clouds on top of this. But what I'm doing is I'm mixing in the white with the blue. And I want to kind of lighten it up as we are going across. So a little bit lighter as we're going to be getting toward this part and this part. So you should be adding some white. And here again, if you want to switch to your smaller brush, please do. I'm about to do that after just working in some of this white for the color of the sky. Okay, so put a little more light on this. So now what we're going to do is really add lots of white to make an almost incredibly light blue. Because we're going to start now making clouds and also a little more lightness to the sky. And so what I'm doing now is I just added a lot of that white to the blue on my palette. And now I'm sort of going in kind of a C motion, as if I'm making the letter C with my brush, so that it has a little bit more of a cloud-like effect. And I'm also going to switch to my smaller brush as well to be able to really get in toward this area and making it a bit lighter. You know, and it all depends on how light you want it. Remember, we haven't added our clouds yet. But we are about to do that. Also, if you ever make one part that is too light or too dark, fear not, because you can go back in with your blue. Let me add a little more blue in here because my paint is starting to dry a bit. It's very dry in my house. So see, I just added a bit more, just a little bit of blue here to mix it with the wet paint so that I could get a little bit more of the paint mixing together. And I'm going to add a little bit darker here just to blend it a bit. And once you have the color of your sky the way you like it, we can now add just a tiny bit. I add a tiny bit of green in this middle section up here, in with the blue, just to give it a little bit of contrast. Just a little bit. Now your paint should be wet in order to do this because you don't want a green sky. You just want a little bit of a greenish blue happening there. And what I do at that point is I then still use my smaller brush in order to mix up some very light whites that have just a tinge of the blue, because this is what we're going to use for our clouds. And clouds are very delicate. I make two main clouds. And I do this by just taking a little bit of paint and dabbing it. You want to sort of mix it in a little bit with your sky. And I like to kind of lighten up. As I mentioned, right above the water. So I've just added just a touch more white to that area. And I'm working that above toward this area as well. You know, you can make a very cloudy sky. We have some more clouds up here. Again, if it gets too white, you can just go back in with some blue. Do that a little in this section. So you can really have fun with the clouds and the sky. I like to make it a bit of an impressionistic sky. And again, getting lighter up here in the corner. This is also where I add tiny touch of green to make sort of this lightish green with the white. And I'm just adding in a little bit more light blue back in so that it mixes. All right, and I'm just gonna add a little more cloud, a little bit of a cloud right here. And maybe one more here. And then we're going to go into our water. In our water line, you should have a little bit of a line, a darker line to separate your sky from your water. And the water is lighter back here, and then it gets darker as it gets toward the sand. So I start off with some white and blue. So same thing. Kind of start off with a little bit of white and blue mixed in already. And I'm using my smaller brush. We want to be able to go back in and make some darker and lighter waves. So we first create a blue. This is a little lighter than what I want. So I'm going to go back in and use the full color of the blue. And we're going to cover that entire area except for the top part, or it's really the back, kind of the back part of where the ocean meets up with the sky. But while you have this blue on your brush, you can also go into your windows and your door and just give it a base color using that blue. Hey, Allison. So again, what we're doing is where we've created the blue for the water. We're going to go back in and make it very light toward the back, and then add some black in the left corner here. But before we do all that, we're just using our blue base to also paint the doors, the door and the windows for right now. I always go back in and I kind of touch up the sky a few times as it starts to dry. I like to make it just a little bit lighter. That's not something you have to do. I just like to kind of, I was taking another look and I thought, want it a little bit lighter. Okay, so, um, and again, at this point, we are using our round brush. And we're now going to go in and use white for the back space here of the water. So I know that our canvas is white, or we're just going to use a little bit of white, and then we're going to use a bit of some light blue underneath that. So again, we use white in the back part, and I'm going to go really close in with my camera here so that you're able to see. And see, I have a sliver of light blue. I'm going to work into, a little bit in the middle here. And then what we want to do is just add some really light, almost white lines like this to create a little bit of some waves going across. You want to make them really tiny because this is far away. If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have a question about how I'm doing this, if you're having any issues, basically I'm using a little bit of white on the edge of my brush here. And then since the paint is still wet, it will mix in rather nicely. And to get a little bit brighter, I'll just go back and add just white because it's mixed in now with blue. But we basically want it to look like a little bit like choppy water, water with some waves in it. And then we're going to rinse our brush because we're going to get into black in this corner. Mix it with the blue and it's going to make it be a darker blue for that area. So I just add just a tiny bit of black. Now, if your paint is not, if it's dry, like what happened to mine just now, again, it's very dry in here, surprisingly. I'm going to mix that in with some blue on my plate so that it gets to be a very dark blue. And then we want to add waves again using this very dark blue. Again, that mix was blue and black. And just kind of create lines coming from the left, this left dark section. Sometimes you have to add a little bit of water to your paintbrush. I didn't know if anybody knows that sometimes you need to add some water in order to get the paint to spread or to thin it out. So I just added just a tiny bit of water and then went on my plate and kind of mixed it around. And now I'm getting what I want with the waves. So I'm just going to show that up close. Yeah, that's mixed in. You know, and the great part is because you have that color now on your brush, we're going to create some shadowing for the top parts of each of our the windows and the doors. So if we go into this top window here, I'm going to add some light to it so you can see. I just have a little bit of that dark blue that I just used to go up in the corner there. Basically up in the corners of each of the windows and the doors. We do go down the left side inside each of those sections so that we kind of outline it a bit. So it's a shadow from the building. That's my light on the one side here, so you can see a little more. So again, what you want to do is have that dark part in there, and then we're going to go in with a little bit lighter of some blue. Now this is, I'm talking about the windows, door. You want to make sure it's done when it's wet so that it blends in with the dark that we just created. I'm going to add a little more blue paint and mix it. And our next step is going to be, as I mentioned, we're going to do the sand, which is going to be a combination of colors, but we're going to start off with our golden brown and our white. We're going to mix it first, sort of get a almost sort of peachy color. And then we're going to lighten that up. So we can add more white to it. I'm going to dip in to some more water in order to spread. And for now, we're going to go around our shadow shapes. Those are going to be darker. So we're going to go around those. Because we're also going to go back and add white to certain areas on the sand. So again, we kind of want this light, kind of this light sand color. I said peach, but it's really more like a tan. Remember to go all the way up to where your water is as well. And if you need to switch to your round brush, please do. We will be doing that shortly. But if you need it now, please do. Right now we're just covering the base color of our sand. We're gonna let that dry a bit. And we're going to go into our buildings using first white. We're going to start here on the left. And then we're going to add in some gray. So we're going to be mixing some black on our paper plate. We're also going to be using a bit of this, tan color that we've created. But first, we're going to use white. As our base. So again, what we're doing is we're covering the first building in white. I know that our canvas is white, but we want paint white. And then when you are finished with that, you're going to start to add some white to the left side of your sand while the paint is still wet. If your paint is not still wet, you want to add in a little more of the tan again. But we're going to be blending that in. Starting on the left side where the building is and going down or more towards the viewer here and down towards the edge of the painting using that white mixed in with your tan. And then we're going to come back over in front of our building here on the right. So I'm moving my brush back and forth quickly in order to still have the tan kind of showing through the white. So it should look like there are some spots of the tan still happening. If there isn't, you can just go back in a little more. But then when you're ready, you're going to grab that brown. It's brownish, you know, golden brown. I kind of call it tan as well. And you're going to paint, finally paint in the shadows. You know, we're going to dull those shadows a bit. But first, this is the first color. There's lots of colors in this little painting, surprisingly. So we're going to make sure to put the base color of the shadows using our golden brown. And here again, you know, you can switch off to your round brush. I just like to kind of fill in the first part using my flat brush. I'm going to put it off to the side. And then in our shadows, we're actually going to add some combination of blue and green so that we get a little bit more of a turquoise. And then we're going to add white to it. Get sort of light, kind of a light turquoise, a light greenish blue. And we're going to add that on top of our shadows. And we're going to dull it in a little bit using white. Now we're going to make a really light bluish green on our plate, because we're going to start adding dots of that color which is an incredibly lightish blue-green. Mixed in with our sand toward the bottom portion, or I should say around this area. And then also we're going to start doing that to our shadows. I like to add a little bit of some very light blue. Also. So we have a combination of the green and then we add some very light blue on the sand. But we're going to go back in and still add a bit of the white mixed in with the golden brown. So that basically what happens is we tone these down a little bit, but we still get a bit of color in there. See, I just went in with a little bit of just a little more tan because it was a little too blue. And here, if you want to add a little bit darker area around your shadow, you can add a little bit more of some of that brown, which is what I'm going back in and doing now. This is all to make it nice and layered. And then I actually go in with some white one more time. Sort of lighten everything up. Even some light in the shadows. So I have some speckled parts of white to make it look like sunlight. And that's our sand. We're going to start back on our building on the left again. At this point, we are using our round brush only, since these are the smaller parts of the painting. So I'm just kind of giving my flat brush a rinse. So we're going to go into our left building here, which we painted white already. But we're now going to be adding a tiny bit of the brown, but we want to mix that with white so that it is barely brown. So we're going to be mixing two colors. First, we're going to be mixing this incredibly light brown, which is right here. And then we're going to mix white with a little bit of black so that we get a gray. So we want those two colors next for that building. So I'm going to take a bit of white from here and then just the teeniest bit of black. Need a lot more white for that. We really use the tiniest bit of black in this painting. Okay, so again, you should have a light gray and also a very light tan. And we're going to start off with the light tan. You know, our building was already, we already put white on it. So now we're going to go in the middle portion of the building and we're going to add in that light tan. We're going to go down to the bottom portion of that building, fill that in too. And we're going to make the top part around here a bit more white. So we can add, you know, we can re-wet our white. And we're just going to add that in to the curved area and into, you know, a little bit of the top part of the, to kind of mesh together with the tan. You know, and we're going to keep this color on our brush because we want this building to sort of be, you know, kind of a few colors a little bit. And then we're going to add in our light gray. My gray is a little too dark. So I'm going to go back in. Kind of want it to be like a light stone color. The bottom of our building. We can add some of that color to the rest of the building in little splotches like this. You know, it's like an old building with You know, it's a little bit dirty. So it's got a bit of gray at the bottom. I also even add a little touch of some light blue. There's a lot of light blue in this painting. I just have like a little touch on the building. Then I mix it in with some white. So it comes out to be a little bit of a bluish gray. And right at the bottom of the building on the sand part, we actually want to add a little bit of a shadow line. And that's going to be a bit of the brown mixed with a tiny bit of black so that the brown is a little darker. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So again, we're mixing a really tiny bit. We're going to be using this color along the edge of the other building as well. So I'm mixing a tiny bit of that brown and black. I'm going to mix a little more of the brown. We really want it more brown in order to match, you know, just a darker shade on the sand. So like that. Kind of like almost like a charcoal brown. So I wanted to show you how to keep your point from getting non-pointy. Basically, if you take your brush while it has paint on it and you press it up against your plate, and then you kind of turn the brush and move it toward you, resting on the point.
My dad's dead, Mom. Okay. Well, you're not supposed to have it anymore anyway.
It will actually have, you know, make your point a little pointy. And so what you then want to do with that is, you know, make that line right under here. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of black to it. Like that. And then we're going to do the same and kind of outline the bottom of the buildings with this color as well. Now I like to go back in and add a little more color on the sand so that it doesn't look so much like it's incredibly dark. You know, and we also want to use this color for in between the two buildings. So again, we're using this color. It looks very dark right now, but we're going to be going back and adding paint up into the edge of it so that it doesn't look so stark as we're doing it. So we're using this color in quite a few spots. We're also using it on the top of the roof here on this building and to outline. So again, this this brownish black, we are using to outline the bottoms of the building. So across here, and here, and here. In between the buildings, these two buildings. And then at the top on the roof. But we do go back to the top of the roof and we make it a little bit lighter by adding some white so that it's not so dark. Again, sometimes I like to go back on the sand and just make some of the parts on the sand a little bit lighter, and especially where we just created that line, I like to go back in with a little bit of the tan. Just go up against the line so that it doesn't look so much like a line. I'm going to do the same up against this building too. That's the great part about acrylic paint is you can keep sort of painting on top of it, mixing it in. Okay, and we're going to go now to this second part of the building here, and we're going to make that white. We're going to be adding a little bit of baby blue to it, but first, again, going in and making it white. And remember, we're adding the greenery last. So these buildings, they're not all stark white. We've got some gray in there. We've got some tan. We're going to do the same thing with this side of the building, but we're first going to add just a tiny bit of some light blue, really tiny bit. Mostly at the bottom where the window is, and also at the top underneath that roof, which we haven't painted yet. And we add a little bit into the white to make it a little more dull. I'm going to mix in some more white so that it dulls the blue. And that's going to bring us to this side of the building, which is going to be gray mixed with a bit of the beige, making it kind of tannish, and the white. So I like to start off with the gray, and then I work the lighter parts into the building. But this building is a bit more darker than the other buildings just because sun is not facing it. So we start off with some light gray. And then work in a tiny bit of the brown mixed with the white to get sort of a beige. And that beige is going to bring us into the next building. So that building is a little bit, same variation of colors. Whitish beige. And then we're going to add some light gray around the windows. We're going to add a little bit of blue for some shaded areas. But first, our base is sort of that beigey color. We add white as we get down toward the door. Again, making sure your paint is wet. So that it mixes in. With all of these colors. And I don't wash my brush off much when I'm doing these buildings. I just added a little more gray. Starting to. It's a little dark, so I'm going to lighten it up. But we definitely want to go around on the left side of the door to make a shadow. And also on the window at the top of the building. And then always adding, some more white to your building. So now I'm adding white in order to mix in with a bit more of the gray so that the gray is not so dark, but I still want a bit of shadow there. As we are rounding out our painting, the only thing we have left after this is our roof and our greenery. So again, while the paint is wet, you want to work in some lighter spots using your white paint. When you're ready, you're going to make your roof your golden brown, but we're going to make a touch of it a little bit dark. Toward the underneath. So that sort of brownish color we made with the black. We add a little bit of that along the edge, but then we're going to add a little bit of slice of white as well. I'm always going back and adding just some dapples of a little bit of white mixed with the brown just for some spots of sunlight. In the sand. Especially towards, on the sand, towards the building with the door. Our last parts are going to be mixing in some greens. So we're going to start off first with a dark green. And so we add a little bit of black to some green to get kind of like what they used to call a forest green. And that's going to be our first layer to our greenery. And then we're going to paint the lighter parts on top of it. So again, I'm going to go down here on the building to the left on the canvas and just going to create using, the round brush, some foliage coming over that building. And we're going to do it on the other parts as well. And again, this is the dark green, which is green mixed with a little bit of black. Kind of dot it along. And I put a little bit in a bush right up against this part of the building. You can choose to add more areas if you like. And then you're going to lighten it up using a little bit of white and green. And you can add as many, you can add 3 different kinds of green in here. Again, I'm just kind of dotting it on a little bit. And then a little bit of regular green. And then if you want to add a little bit of, white mixed with green, make it a lighter green. You can do that too. And then any remaining spots, I like to add a little bit of, like I mentioned, some little bit of light blue again on parts of the parts of the sand, where closer to where the on the shadows, especially in this corner here, just a little bit. On some of the buildings. Can't wait to see what these look like. Give you another minute or two. Out my water.
Anita, do you want to turn off the recording?
What's that?
Should we turn off the recording?
Oh, yes. Let me do that. Thank you.
Yep.